Hi everyone. In this edition of Writing Notes, I'm going to talk to you guys about another model of argumentation, this time one called Rogerian Argument. Now so brief history. Rogerian Argument was developed by the psychologist Carl Rogers, and he developed this idea in the 50s. So this is very much a product of the early Cold War era. And basically, so Rogers was a psychologist who was very interested in group psychology and the psychology of communication. And so what the goal with the Rogerian model of argument is equal communication. So this is not necessarily the kind of argument we normally find in, say, academic essays, where, at least the way we traditionally think of them, is that the goal is to convince a reader or convince an opponent, whatever it is, that our position is the correct one. This is not fundamentally the goal of Rogerian argument. To a certain degree, this becomes a component of it, but not in the sort of traditional, not in the sense that you try and convince someone with a polemic. So you can see the polemic video that I made, which is basically the exact opposite of Rogerian argument. So, basically what happens with Rogerian argument is empathy is the sort of easiest way to say this. So you identify your opponent's position. And so when Rogers gave the sort of initial paper that launched this whole Rogerian argument model, he did that in the context of the Korean War. So this was, I think, 1953, and he was talking about the way that we could make peace in Korea, which would be for, say, the American delegates to empathize with the North Korean delegates, and North Koreans to empathize with the U.S. And the idea here is that when someone says, "You're wrong, your position is incorrect," or immoral, or whatever it is, what we as humans tend to do is to entrench ourselves in that position. So the idea that Rogers had is that if you approach an opponent with empathy, and they approach you with empathy, or even if, say, I approach you with empathy and you're initially hostile, once I can show you that I'm interested in your position, interested in your values and things like this, your resistance to open discussion will break down. So the idea here, ultimately, is through a sort of shared communication, we can come to a compromise that's mutually beneficial and that relies on shared values. So, the way that Rogers sort of envisions this working would be, if I'm arguing with you, what I would do is restate your position. So what I need to do is to figure out what it is that you want and why. And this is a crucial component of it. It's not just what you want, but why you want it. So what you believe about the world, what you value, what's important to you, how you see the issue. All of these things are things I need to understand, and I need to restate them to you. And once I've restated your argument to the point where you say, yes, that's what I believe, then we're prepared for a dialogue. Now, conceptually, you would do the same thing, where you would say, all right, this is what I think that you believe, and why. And I would say, well, that's not exactly it. These are the parts that are right, these are the parts that are different, and we would keep sort of in dialogue until we understand one another's positions. So now we've got two positions, your position and my position, which we both understand. So what we now do is we start to look for points of connection, shared values. So we both believe in freedom, we both believe in the integrity of the individual, whatever it is. We both believe in, I don't know, the importance of education, whatever kind kinds of connections, whatever kind of shared values, shared beliefs we can find, that's what we're looking for. Because that, according to Rogers, is going to become the basis for our compromise. So the question then becomes, so in terms of coming up with a solution to the debate or a solution to the issue, the question then becomes not how do I convince you to accept my position and you convince me to accept your position. The question becomes, what can we do that achieves some of both of our goals and expresses or embodies each of our sets of values. So again, the idea here is that we compromise. And we compromise based on what we each believe in, we compromise based on what we each value, what we each want. Again, this is not something that we see a lot in academics because as much as this model has been criticized, we still tend to rely on this sort of military model of convincing the other side that you're right. This is a model that works really well in the real world, though. So this is the kind of thing that ideally should be happening in places like Congress. Of course, it isn't, but this is the kind of thing that should be happening in places like Congress, in business places, things like this. Anywhere where some kind of policy is decided, anywhere where some kind of questions of what should we do are asked. So, thanks.